So I think they did it. And I think that just Stewart and Lynda can't not build businesses. Like it's in their blood. Like they I think they had the best of intentions. One, two, three. Coming up, the story of the Wonderful Company. The Modern Acre explores business, investing, technology, and sustainability in agriculture, and we're your hosts, Tyler and Tim Nuss. If you'd like to dig deeper with the Modern Acre, be sure to check out our membership community, the Modern Acre Co-op. The Modern Acre podcast is presented by Local Line. Local Line is the all-in-one local food sourcing platform for restaurants, grocers, and distributors. Use Local Line to discover and buy from thousands of family farms that sell every kind of product category, including produce, meat, dairy, and more. Whether you're a single location independent grocery store or a nationwide chain, Local Line helps retailers of all sizes build scalable farm-to-fork supply chains. To learn more about how to source local with Local Line, visit their website at www.localline.ca or click the link in our show notes. Tim, it's here. It took us a while to get here, but it is officially our second in our story series with the podcast. Our first story series we debuted several months back. It was all about the Climate Corporation. If you haven't listened to that one, be sure to check it out. It's our most downloaded podcast ever. So that was a ton of fun, Tim. We knew we needed to keep this going. And these are beastly to handle. I have a ton of respect for the Acquired guys, that the Acquired podcast, if you're not familiar, do these long form deep dives of companies. And we thought, hey, let's do this for agriculture. And that's really where the idea came from. Granted, Tim, they both do that full time. So I think we can cut ourselves a little slack. This we're doing in our off hours, but we are so excited to finally share what we were up to next in this series, and it's talking about The Wonderful Company.
Ty, I'm so pumped to record this episode. The Wonderful Company is a fascinating story. A lot of consumers touch this. Half of U.S. consumers use Wonderful products. It's a pretty fascinating stat. They're privately held, the 130th biggest privately held company in the U.S., doing over $5 billion in sales. They're a massive holding company with a ton of ag businesses and consumer-facing businesses that I'm excited to dive into.
Yeah, this is one of those companies, Tim, where it's like, if you don't know The Wonderful Company, like you actually do. You just don't know that you do. Like everyone knows The Wonderful Company. They are behind Wonderful Pistachios. They are behind Palm, so the pomegranate juice and that whole brand. They are behind Fiji water. They are behind Teleflora. And we're going to get into the whole story of how this empire, Tim, was created.
Ty, let's take a step back and set the table a little bit and learn a little bit more about Stewart and Lynda Resnick, the owners of The Wonderful Company. Let's start with Stewart. He's 87 years old. He's been doing this for a very long time. He was born in 1936 in Highland Park, New Jersey. His dad was a Yiddish-speaking Ukrainian bartender. He had a pretty tough upbringing, Ty. He grew up in a lower-class family. He recounts in an interview with Mark Arax that all of his pals were Jewish kids from the middle and upper class families, and it wasn't easy being the poorest one. He said, I remember one time in high school, the car was gone. He lost it in a bet. He was very tough, bull-like, and didn't take crap from anyone. But inside of these weaknesses, he was a compulsive gambler and an alcoholic. So just think about that, Ty. Like the founder of a $5 billion company now just started so poor, such a rough childhood. So it's just an incredible story of like what he was able to build over his career. He said his father was a great negative role model. The lessons I got from him were all what not to do. The only positive he taught me was to never let anyone push me around, which I think is true today. Like we'll get into some of the dramas of The Wonderful Company, but Stewart doesn't take crap from anybody. And I think he gets that from his dad. So he said his drive came from financial insecurity. He saw that as a child. He never wanted to go backwards, always lived below his means, so it would give him flexibility to take risks. Stewart's first entrepreneurial venture was as a 13-year-old in Highland Park, selling Christmas to Christian families in East New Jersey. People didn't have cameras in those days, so after snow, he'd take a picture of their house with Christmas trees all lit up on display and sell it to them. I had good technique, but not much artistry. So at 13, he's already getting into business and starting to learn how to make money. In 1956, at the age of 20, he moved out to California to go to UCLA after his dad had gambled away everything. So he's over Jersey, wants to start a new life. He heads west in 1956. He paid his way through UCLA by working as a janitor and went on to found White Glove Building Maintenance, which quickly grew to 1,000 employees and made him his first million before he graduated law school in 1962 at the age of 26. So in 6 years, Ty, he starts working as a janitor and quickly employs 1,000 people within 6 years. It's insane.
This is the ultimate, American story, right? The ultimate entrepreneurial story. He has this crazy upbringing, moves west, and is just hustling. We talk about how do you make your first, $1 million, right? There's the podcast, My First Million. And we can't gloss over this. Like, he built and scaled this service business to get there in janitorial business services. Like, this is the most boring as they come to get that first accumulation of money.
Totally. You always hear the stories of the CEO that started sweeping the floors of the building, like Stewart started his career being a janitor. And so he has this business that's booming. He's made $1 million by the time he graduates UCLA. And he takes those same commercial buildings that he's servicing for janitorial services and begins offering them services to watch them with security guards and alarm systems. And so by the 1970s, Stewart had controlled over half of the commercial alarm accounts in LA, $100 million business. So at $1 million, and then layers on this alarm service security guard business, turns it into a $100 million company.
Absolutely crazy. All right. So that's kind of the background of Stewart. Now, enter Lynda. Stewart has a wild personality, has this crazy upbringing and a gambling father, and hustler through and through to build his first initial capital. Lynda is equal, if not more important to this story. This is the ultimate power couple here. So Lynda, she grew up in Philadelphia. Her dad was a film distributor, and they moved the family out pretty early in her youth to LA after he produced the horror film The Blob in 1960. So she moves. It was difficult for her mother to make that switch because they had family nearby in Philadelphia. So they come out west, similar to Stewart, but this time it was the whole family. She comes out with the whole family. They were middle class, right? So they had money. I think her dad had a Rolls Royce. That was like what he spent his money on, working in Hollywood, producing films. Like the Rolls Royce was like, that's what you spent money on. So it was obviously a difficult transition. She wanted to go into art school, right? So you'll learn that Stewart and Lynda are big art collectors and really big into just the arts. We'll get into charitable donations and how they've spent their money, but they're really, both into the arts. And this started at a young age with Lynda. So she wanted to go to art school. Her dad said no, that he wouldn't fund it, didn't have the money. She ended up going 1 year to Santa Monica City College. So doesn't go to art school, does the cheap path, Santa Monica City College, which she raves about as a great beginning education, and then leaves college to work in an advertising agency at the age of 19. So she gets into advertising very early on. She's young, she's scrappy, she's a woman in a male-dominated industry, but she's just going to get after it. Around this time, she has her first marriage, has a child, end up getting a divorce. So she's a single mom, Tim, and hustling in ad agency, started running her own ad agency in the 60s. So she is really running as far away from the traditional woman path, right? Like, she is a single mom. She is in a male-dominated industry. She's running her own company, right? So she's like, check, like the non-traditional path. Okay, so Tim, got to get into this crazy, we're going to detour for a second, a crazy story about Lynda while she had her own advertising agency. So she got involved in a little political drama here, Tim. She began doing occasional work for the anti-war movement during the Vietnam War. So by the fall of 1969, she was divorced, dating Anthony J. Russo, an engineer at Rand Corporation, which was a think tank in Santa Monica, California. He and his colleague Daniel asked her, Lynda, hey, like we're working on some reporting and we need to use your copier, right? Because she's an ad agency. So she has a Xerox 812 machine in her ad agency. And so she's like, yeah, guys, like use my copier. Great. Like I know you're working on important stuff in her eyes, right? So she lets them use her copy machine. She doesn't really know what it's about. Starting the night of October 1st of 69, Russo, Ellsberg, and various helpers copied 7,000 pages of the government-ordered secret history of America's involvement in Vietnam. You know what those are? Those are the Pentagon Papers. So Ellsberg asked to use her copy machine on nights, weekends to distribute top secret military documents. Ultimately, Ellsberg gave these documents to the New York Times, then published them. These are the famous Pentagon Papers that were released. They detailed aspects of the war hidden from the public and damaged the credibility of the presidents involved. She was designated an unindicted co-conspirator for her role and was pursued by prosecutors for 2 years. Ultimately, legal actions were eventually dropped. But wow, like gotta just sneak in some political espionage drama into this story.
Yeah, talking about the Pentagon Papers in the Wonderful Company episode was not on my 2024 bingo card, Ty.
Insane. All right, so now basically where are we at? So Stewart hustling, building his janitorial business, Lynda hustling, building her ad agency, single mom, both really just working super hard to rise the ranks. A few years later, Lynda meets Stewart. When Stewart needed some advertising work for his janitorial service, a friend recommended Lynda's agency. And she says in her book, I never got the account, but I sure got the business. They were married in 1973. So this is pretty funny. You can kind of hear Lynda's wit, right? Like she is very witty, charming. She reminds me of the middle-aged older woman that would come up and give you a kiss on the cheek and like, how are you doing, doll? And you have your red lipstick on your cheek as a result. But she is super with it, super sharp, and has a knack for advertising. So they get married. Stewart has made money now from the janitorial business. Lynda has her ad agency. This is kind of like a really interesting power couple dynamic, right? Like he is this quote unquote genius in business. He sees potential in acquiring and growing businesses. She's the marketing quote unquote genius, right? So they're kind of this great tag team. So everything gets started, Tim, with Teleflora. So Tim, I got to dig into this Teleflora thing. So they buy Teleflora in 1979. What is Teleflora? So this is hilarious. So Teleflora was a flowers by wire service. What is that? I had no idea. What is flowers by wire? So flowers by wire refers to a service that allows people to order flowers remotely, typically over the phone, and have them delivered to someone in a different location. This service is facilitated by networks of florists who share orders with each other. When a customer orders flowers to be sent to someone in another city, the order is transmitted, originally by telegraph wire, hence the term by wire, to a florist in the recipient's locale, who then arranges for the flowers to be prepared and delivered. This system was pioneered by organizations like FTD, this will come up later, Florist Telegraph Delivery Association, Teleflora, among others. It allowed for the rapid and reliable delivery of fresh flowers across long distances, enabling people to send floral gifts to loved ones, regardless of the geographical separation. So now, obviously, Tim, this just happens over the internet, right? Like this is a perfect opportunity for the internet to address some of the inefficiencies with this model. But did you know that this was a thing, flower by wire?
Such a crazy story. Like, I wonder how they even came across this company to acquire. And like, obviously they saw that they could grow and scale this business, like coming from janitorial services and commercial protection services. Lynda has the advertising eye. They must have saw some value there of like, this is an interesting base to a business and we can really grow it, which they ultimately did.
Yeah. And Teleflora was really struggling, right? At the time, they were overmatched by the big FTD. That was the 800-pound gorilla in this world. And so they felt like, hey, this is an opportunity to buy this and gain market share. In Lynda's book, she talks about the president of Teleflora. It was a classic like guy who was just like trying not to rock the boat too much, right? Like kind of ready to ride off into the sunset, just don't break anything. And so they acquire this business. Stewart becomes the new president and Lynda becomes the executive vice president of marketing. So what do they do? What's the unlock? And I think we'll find this as kind of a consistent theme about Stewart and Lynda is they buy a business or they grow a business and they have some sort of key unlock, key decision, key lever that they make with that business. And with Teleflora, Lynda looked at it and said, hey, how can we differentiate? How can we not, FTD is the biggest player in the space. Most of florists start with FTD, and then if they consume their credit amount with FTD, they use Teleflora as a backup, right? It's like how people use credit cards. They're maxed out on one, they use another. Her big marketing insight was, well, the problem with flowers is they don't last, right? You deliver them and a week later you gotta throw them away. And that's just the blessing and the curse of flowers. And what if the delivery mechanism, the vase, was something that could be a keepsake? She writes in her book, in the early 1980s, the US economy had still not recovered. In fact, 1982 ushered in a massive recession. Flowers, then as now, were a luxury, and they were a peculiar luxury, one that died. My research indicated that one reason people were afraid to send flowers was that they didn't know what would show up on the recipient's doorstep. I was desperate for a way not only to differentiate our service from FTDs, but to give consumers added value that would inspire them to ask specifically for Teleflora flowers. Then I thought of the container the flowers came in. So, Tim, for the price of flowers offered by their competitors, Teleflora could instead provide flowers in a keepsake watering can, a lovely teacup, or a cookie jar, or with a teddy bear. So this distinguished them, right? And this is like where she's done this in a number of their businesses. How do we differentiate ourselves? We talk about it on the podcast. We talk about it in business. Like you need to do something that differentiates you from the crowd, especially if you have lower market share, right? So she pioneers this idea of flowers in a gift. It transforms the business. They have significant growth. So they ultimately try to buy FTD, and the deal is blocked. The FTD board blocks it and goes with a lower bid from a different buyer. But they ultimately do several more acquisitions to grow this business. Another key thing I learned was Teleflora had a magazine that they would send out to florists. She completely revamped that, really invested in that to drive relationships with their florists and drive further demand. And then they also did a massive Mother's Day campaign where they did content with Good Morning America and this whole competition around the best mother and a massive sweepstakes. So she is just doing all these different levers to grow this business. And this is the first big acquisition and massive success story that they still own today.
Yeah, a lot of foreshadowing there, Ty, like taking something that at the time was a commodity of a bouquet of flowers and adding some kind of differentiator or branding and marketing around that. Like we'll see that later on when we talk about their different ag businesses and how they've really taken commodities and turned them into premium offerings for consumers.
Okay, so Teleflora gets things started. What's next? That's always the question with the wonderful company, Tim, with Stewart and Lynda. They are always looking for what's next, how to grow this thing. And so next for them, they're generating revenue through Teleflora. Stewart has built API systems as their alarm system business that has grown substantially over time. They're generating cash. Their next big deal is the acquisition of the Franklin Mint. So in her book, she talks about the transition from Teleflora to the Franklin Mint. She says, in an effort to replace myself as the new products creator at Teleflora, she was looking to hire the right person. The Franklin Mint was located in Philadelphia, where I was originally from. My best friend from childhood had grown up to be a hotshot recruiter, so I sent her into the Mint to find out who was creating their products. In no time at all, Stewart and I were sitting in our garden in California, interviewing or interrogating the Mint's VP of product development. He told me the company was poorly managed and grossly dysfunctional. He also said the mint might be for sale. We hired that fellow to come to Teleflora, and I went on to persuade Stewart that the mint might be our next acquisition. Crazy. So she's looking for someone to replace her as head of new products at Teleflora, interviews someone at the Franklin Mint. Oh, it just so happens to be dysfunctional and just so happens to maybe be for sale. And they're like, all right, we're in, we're interested. Sounds like something we want to be a part of. And she had initially thought she might want to go into competition with the mint, just start something from scratch, right? But Stewart always says, quote, startups are a bitch.
I love that quote.
So they acquire the Franklin Mint. It was owned by Warner Brothers. Like, there's all these just fascinating pieces of this story. So they acquire the Franklin Mint. What's the Franklin Mint, Tim? So the Franklin Mint does collectibles. They do like commemorative coins and collectibles and dolls. Perfect time. Like I think the year of this acquisition was 1984 to 1986 range. They made model cars, souvenir plates, figurines, Civil War inspired chess sets. Stewart served as CEO and chairman of the Franklin Mint Company until its sale to a private equity in 2006. So similar to Teleflora here, he's like, all right, bought this business. Let's get Lynda in here. It's time to bring in the star player, do your magic. So she comes into the Franklin Mint. It's struggling, it's dysfunctional, and she leans into some of these product categories and leans into licensing. So doing licensing deals, and they're just getting after it. I think that, again, it's like they're just aggressive with everything. They're like, this is a business opportunity. Let's jump in and do it. So Tim, I have two great stories for you. One, again, bingo card. This is crazy. On her first day of work, she asked someone in the Mint's female collectibles department, so dolls, about a doll on her shelf. Oh, that's Scarlett O'Hara, the person responded, in her green dress from the barbecue. Poor thing is covered in dust. What happened? So she said management doesn't believe in Hollywood. So she leaned into Hollywood. They do another run and focus on collectible dolls. And in their first run of Scarlett O'Hara, they generated $35 million in sales. There was just all this untapped potential at this company, and it was just people not being aggressive. They were just like, oh, we don't like Hollywood for whatever reason. So she leans into that. So then the other crazy story is on Jackie Kennedy's pearls. So Jackie Kennedy, I didn't know this, Tim, she wore pearls. It was her signature look, and they were fake. Her actual pearls were fake, which is just hilarious. And so Jackie dies. These fake pearls are put up for auction. Sotheby's announced it's the auction of the century to sell the estate of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. Lynda was like, I need these because we're going to build replicas of these fake pearls, and they're going to go crazy. So she basically tells Stewart, hey, I'm going to do this. And he's like, I can't control this woman, right? Like, go ahead. I trust you. The starting price was $5,000. She buys these fake pearls for $211,000.
Oh my gosh. This is like NFTs in 1980 or something of what she's coming up with.
Insane. So she buys these fake pearls. And the reason she did it was she wanted to have them to perfectly replicate them because she felt like she couldn't do it just with pictures, right? So she perfectly replicates them at $2,011, Tim. That was a steep investment. The pearls turned out to have pretty strong ROI. They sold more than 130,000 copies at $200 a strand for a gross of $26 million.
Insane.
So the story here, she invested in all these, untapped opportunities. And in their first 7 years, they took the business from $150 million a year in sales to nearly $1 billion. So just massive growth, massive marketing prowess. And the last thing I'll add, Tim, is that she had an emphasis on research. We'll see this come up in future areas, but she was really committed to understanding the market and what people would want to buy. And so investing in research of what are the movies doing really well? What do people have interest in? And that was a key lever she used to grow sales.
Ty, we're an agriculture podcast. What does all this have to do with agriculture? So I think we got to make the connection. Now it's kind of the mid 1980s. The Resnicks have a lot going on. They're starting to form this holding company. They have API, they have Teleflora. They have the Franklin Mint, and they're starting to make some real cash. And so they're looking for ways to invest their money, and they look at farmland as a hedge against inflation. So they start going up into the Central Valley, starting to look at investment opportunities. So the first deal they do, Ty, is 2,500 acres, a citrus grove in Delano, California, which is just north of Bakersfield. So they acquire the farmland as well as a processing operation, which becomes known as Paramount Citrus Association. They pack fruit for both retail and wholesale markets, selling oranges, lemons, and grapefruit. So kind of a suite of citrus products. A business they know nothing about, Ty. They're coming from advertising. They're coming from the Franklin Mint and from security systems, and now they're getting into farming. So they've proven that they can get into a business that they don't really have a background in and be very successful at it. They're outside the box thinkers, and they're going to apply this to agriculture. So it's kind of exciting times. Just to foreshadow a little bit, the Resnicks have made substantial farmland investment between the mid-1980s and to where we are now. Last year, they were the 83rd biggest landowner in the U.S., having just under 200,000 acres. So with this 2,500 acre initial farmland, they're close to 200,000 now. So it's incredible to see how they've grown during that period. So let's dig into Paramount Citrus a little bit, Ty. They get into this business. It is operating as Paramount Citrus Association, and they start to kind of create some functions within their farming operation. They have Paramount Farming, and then they have Paramount Citrus, which is more the packing house operation. Historically, they operated it under the Sunkist cooperatives. The packing house was part of a membership group for Sunkist. So Sunkist did all the marketing. They were centralized out of Southern California, and they worked with a bunch of independent grower packer shippers in the Central Valley, Paramount Citrus being one of them.
Tim, I think it's hard to say if Stewart and Lynda had a master plan to build this massive agribusiness. I don't think they did. I think that initially it was, like you said, it was an investment. It was, we're going to buy farmland. It's like the tried and true recession resistant, inflation resistant asset class, very conservative, risk mitigating asset class. So I think they did it. And I think that just Stewart and Lynda can't not build businesses. Like, it's in their blood. Like they I think they had the best of intentions. Let's go buy a business. We'll like partner with farmers. We'll partner with marketers. And it's just an investment. It's going to return good returns over the long term. They just can't do it. They're just hustlers through and through. They're entrepreneurs. And I think they see this relationship and dynamic with the marketers. And they're like, wait a second. Like, we can do this. We know how to build businesses. Like, they're taking a cut that we want the cut of, because these guys are ruthless. So I think it may have started just a pure investment, and I just think they couldn't help themselves.
Yeah, I don't think they can handle a passive investment. They saw an opportunity where the marketing was being underserved, and they're marketers, and they saw a lot of value there. The citrus thing is interesting. Like, at that time, like, it was navel oranges and lemons and kind of like the standard citrus products. And like now when you go to the grocery store, it's all easy peeler mandarins, which we'll get into. But the citrus category has changed pretty substantially over the past few decades. So Ty, going to take another little segue back to 1988. And in parallel to all this happening, California is going through an evolution in the water structure for the state. In 1988, the Kern Water Bank was established. The Kern Water Bank is a 32-mile recharge basin outside of Bakersfield, which looks like floodlands from the street, that essentially stores up to 1.5 million acre-feet of water, or 500 billion gallons underground. So this was a project built by the state of California to basically create an opportunity to recharge groundwater. So we have these huge aquifers under the Central Valley that store water. When farmers are using ground wells, they're basically putting a straw down into the aquifer and sucking it out. And if those don't get recharged, they essentially go dry. So this was a massive state project to bank water, exactly what it's called, for times of drought. So the water is stored underground during the wet years and recovered during the dry years for agricultural and municipal uses. In 1988, the property was acquired by the California Department of Water Resources, DWR, on behalf of the state, which planned to develop a functioning water bank on the property. We'll come back to this, Ty. So Ty, we're now getting into the late 1980s, and the farming business is taking off, and they're starting to get into crops other than citrus. So in 1986, they purchased Apex Orchards from Mobil Oil for $30 million. The 12,000-acre pistachio and almond farm near Bakersfield was renamed Paramount Farming Company. The next year, the Resnicks bought Texaco's Central California farming operations, adding some 77,000 acres of farmland, also in the San Joaquin Valley. So massive expansion in a short amount of time. Like the first acquisition was mid 1980s. By the late 1980s, they've gone from 2,500 acres to almost 100,000 acres. In 1989, the Resnicks formed Paramount Farms, a processing and marketing group that sold pistachios and almonds under its own label as well as wholesale. Paramount Farms nuts were soon selling across the country and internationally, primarily to cereal and candy manufacturers, including Cadbury, Nestle, Hershey, Carnation, and Kellogg. Over the years, Paramount Farms expanded its processing and marketing operations to include citrus, olives, and pomegranates. So Ty, they're blowing up. They're getting into the processing. I think that's one thing we talk about on the podcast is being vertically integrated. And they saw a huge opportunity to capture market share going downstream from the farm gate of like being able to actually sell the product they grow themselves. In 1993, Paramount Farms and Pistachio Producers of California formed a marketing co-op called Cal Pure Pistachios and began offering pistachios under the Sunkist name, the connection back to Sunkist. In 1996, Paramount Farms was the largest grower, processor, and marketer of almonds and pistachios in the world. In the world, Ty.
Yeah, so, I mean, what is this? A period of 10, 20 years? They go from making an investment into farmland to become one of the biggest growers in the world.
Totally. And by the late 1990s, Paramount Citrus, the citrus division, had become one of the state's largest citrus producers. In 2000, the company bought 3,900 acres and several packing houses from Dole Food Company for $55 million. The purchase, which brought its total acreage of citrus to nearly 27,000 acres and made Paramount Citrus the largest grower, packer, and marketer of fresh citrus in the country. So they're the biggest citrus producer, the biggest almond producer, and the biggest pistachio producer. Crazy.
And it was in 93, I believe, where they bring everything under one holdco, one holding company called Roll International. So they have all these businesses that we talked about on more the consumer side. They have all the farmland, the farming businesses, all under Roll International. They're creating one massive holding company. The private Berkshire Hathaway for ag or something, right? Like they were doing the holdco before holdco was cool, and they really operated largely in private. They had really built this fortune, this empire. They were living in Beverly Hills, Tim, and they were living life with the celebrities, right? Like they were really in the elite culture of Beverly Hills, but they didn't do interviews. They didn't talk about their business as much. It was like the opposite of Warren Buffett, who was very public, who had annual meetings, like none of that. They were staying very quiet about what they were doing. And Tim, I think this is a great place to talk about maybe one of the reasons why they were so quiet about some of their activities. You just talked about their massive growth of farmland over this period, and you mentioned the water bank. Let's talk about maybe a little controversy this time, sort of political controversy, Tim, but I think even bigger than that, cultural controversy.
Totally, Ty. Like anytime you Google Stewart Resnick, there's going to be some articles related to water consumption. You have a business that's growing rapidly, a lot of farmland, a lot of acres, and what do farms use a lot of? Water. So in 1994, there was this kind of like secretive backdoor water meeting for the state of California. It's known as the Monterey Agreements. As part of the Monterey Agreement, the Department of Water Resources turned over a state asset, the Kern Water Bank, to Kern County Water Agency in exchange for retiring 45,000 acre feet of paper water that Kern County would never receive. So they kind of make this trade, selling this state-owned asset to a local water agency in exchange for retiring paper water, like water rights, essentially. It's not real water, it's the rights to the water. So the principals that executed this agreement were the Kern County Water Agency, Dudley Ridge Water District, Semitropic Water Storage District, Wheeler Ridge Maricopa Water Storage District, and Westside Mutual Water Company for the development, operation, and maintenance of the Fern Fan element of the Kern County Water Bank. So, Ty, a number of different water districts are involved in this transaction in the Monterey Agreements. One of the companies mentioned was Westside Mutual Water Company. Who owns Westside Mutual Water Company? Stewart and Lynda Resnick.
This is crazy. So, to just summarize here, there is what presumably should be or has been a public entity, the water bank, is part of this backdoor agreement. Stewart and Lynda were not at this, were not there, but there was a proxy there. They agreed to this really convoluted structure and agreement that turned this public entity into a entity that was owned by a private business. And that private business was Paramount Farms. So this is a massive conflict of interest and borderline illegal. There's arguments, there's like been litigation on this, there's been investigations on this of was this a gray area at best and illegal at worst. But the result, Tim, is that the Resnicks basically control a water bank in an area where they're growing their ag business that requires massive amounts of water. And what's crazy is in this area, it hasn't been farmland. It's been dry. And they basically built up farmland using and leveraging this water to build up ag farmland that wasn't historically in ag land because people didn't think that you could get enough water to have a profitable farming operation. This is crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah, they end up with almost 60% ownership in this asset. And so like you can see why people get upset about this. If we have a drought, you have private company that can divert water to keep their trees alive, keep their permanent crops alive. It's not like an annual crop where they can just go fallow 1 year of like you have to have water on to keep those groves alive. And they have significant interest and investment in these crops. So it just has come under a ton of scrutiny. Like you say, it's been litigated for decades ever since it was put into place.
So this kind of underpins their whole empire building is this benefit, arguably this public benefit that they take advantage of. And this is a tough one, Tim, because they are, as we've seen, incredibly aggressive. They're always trying to turn over every rock for every opportunity that presents itself. On one side, you can argue, hey, they took advantage of something where they were in the right place at the right time. They had the connections and they were able to take advantage of a deal that was above board. And then at worst, you can say this was totally illegal. I fall somewhere in between. And I think that we look at some of the big empire builders, Rockefeller, right? These guys were incredibly harsh and aggressive. And I don't know if it's Rockefeller, Tim, don't fact check me on this, but like some of these big moguls of American history, like had people killed, right? Like they were gnarly people and definitely breaking the law in many instances. So this is not uncommon. I'm not condoning it, but this is the type of, empire builders that Stewart and Lynda are. They're cutting corners. They're going up against the gray area. They're doing everything they can to maximize this empire, this business.
Yeah, they're definitely operating in a gray area and bending the rules a little bit. Their response to the criticism of their majority control in the water bank is that they attained it legally. Like it was a legal document that was signed, like that it's being litigated, but nothing's been overturned. So like they legally have ownership there. They also say they've reinvested tens of $millions of back into programs for their workers in the Central Valley and the broader community, as well as environmental research. The Resnicks pledged $750 million to California Institute of Technology for the Climate Crisis projects in 2019. So they do a lot of philanthropic work, Ty. They do give back to community. We'll hit on that more. So there's definitely been some criticism here on water, but they are doing some positive benefits for local communities as well as agricultural innovation.
Yeah, they have invested heavily in philanthropy and leaned in there, both at a California local level, education, the arts. They're active philanthropists, but there's some warts, and no one should be surprised about that. No one should be surprised. And if you want to learn more about the water deal, there's a fascinating documentary. It's on Disney Plus right now. That's called Water and Power. Man, I would encourage you guys to check it out. It's crazy. It's a crazy story about the whole water thing, but it's definitely, we have to bring this up in any conversation of the wonderful company. All right, Tim, the Resnicks are not done yet. Okay. So they built these massive agribusinesses. You're going to get into more of the evolution of those, but I'm going to start with one that's probably the most notable, and that's palm. So they acquired some pomegranate orchards, and pomegranates, when they acquire these orchards, Tim, pomegranates, I can't overstate this. They weren't a thing. They weren't a big market. The market was essentially non-existent. And so they have some pomegranate orchards. They see it as a potential growth area. There's only growth when the starting point is nothing. And so they see it as an opportunity to grow this market. And so they're, how are we going to do this? And this is where, again, this innovative and just aggressive mindset comes into place, is how can we market pomegranates better? And so they were working, Lynda's, still doing her thing with Franklin Mint. She takes some time off. She's like successful. She's relaxing, and they hire an outside agency to discuss how are we going to market pomegranates. And so the outside agency talked about using pomegranates and doing some sort of pomegranate juice, but a lot of those at the time were highly, highly watered down with other juices, right? Because pomegranate juice was expensive or hard to obtain. And so you get like a pomegranate juice flavor, right? But it's not pure pomegranates. And they thought, we'll just put this on the grocery store next to the other juices. And that was their pitch. And Stewart brought Lynda in for that pitch because, hey, I just want to see what my wife has to say about that. And she is beside herself because she has been investigating the health benefits of pomegranates and the history of pomegranates. There's a massive history of this fruit and how different civilizations use this fruit for health benefits. And so she starts researching just like the crazy benefits, health benefits of this amazing fruit. And so she views this proposal by this marketing agency as shameful, right? Like she has to do the Lynda Resnick thing. She has to do something unique. And so she wants to lean in to the health benefits of pomegranates there, and they've invested millions and millions of dollars in research of the health benefits of pomegranates and pomegranate juice. And she wants to lean into, we grow the best pomegranates in the world. We want them to be not diluted at all, right? Like we make the best ones. We want them concentrated. And so she comes up with this idea of doing pure pomegranate juice. And so she thinks it's differentiated. It's not diluted. You can do a ton with it. It's a versatile thing. You could put and make a cocktail out of it. You can add a salad dressing. You can just drink a shot a day. And so she takes over the whole thing. So bye-bye marketing agency. Lynda Resnick's here. Lynda Resnick is ready to shine. And her key piece is like, she knew the pomegranate was special and that they could build something around it because of the health benefits. And she decided, I'm going to take a little card out of the Teleflora success. What was the piece with Teleflora, Tim? It was flowers in a box. It was what does it come in? So she says the bottle has to be different. It has to be compelling. It has to be unique. And so they're working on, hey, like what can we do for different bottles? And everyone's telling her, Lynda, no, let's just do the cheap bottle. A glass bottle would be really expensive. An alternate shape would be almost impossible to manufacture, to ship. Think about the logistical nightmare, Tim. Like you've worked in produce, right? Like shipping and logistics. It is a nightmare to ship a non-standard container. But she leans in heavily. And the unlock moment is she's like, I want a glass bottle that almost mimics and shows the shape of the pomegranates that are in the pomegranate. So the little balls. She comes up with this crazy concept of this unique container, bottle, glass. And they have to figure out manufacturing because those break into each other on the manufacturing line. They have to figure out all this stuff, spend tons of money on an expensive container, an expensive and hard to manufacture container, and an expensive product. And so really, there's a lot of headwinds here of making the success, and it turns into a massive success.
Ty, I feel like everybody has seen that unique bottle that's just so distinct on the shelf, and they're doing so many different things here. Taking a commodity that nobody really buys, a pomegranate, it's hard to use, hard to process, having it in juice form, leaning into health benefits, which I think was very new at the time. Like, I think when this came out, like I didn't really know what antioxidants were, probably still don't know what they are, but like they were just pushing that super hard. Like I think everybody, when they saw pomegranate juice, like they knew there was some kind of health benefit associated with it.
So Tim, looking back at my notes here, they got into the pomegranate business with a helpful push from happenstance. Remember how I mentioned it was just kind of like this small orchard? In 86, Stewart bought a large pistachio orchard and discovered that the sale included more than 100 acres of pomegranates. So they just happened to acquire farmland that had pomegranates. Like this is crazy. It's what I said. It's them taking advantage of every opportunity.
Yeah, it's crazy that they just like didn't take those and transition them to nut crops or to citrus. They're like, oh, we have something here. Like, what can we build on top of it?
One of Stewart's farmers advised, let's pull the pomegranates and plant more nuts. And she says, Stewart is successful not only because he's smart, he's successful in part because he keeps himself open to new opportunities, and he knows how to be patient. He responded, let's see how they do. Those little 5 words would create an industry. So talking about growth here, their fresh pomegranate sales went from 100,000 cartons in 2001 to more than 2 million cartons in 2008. Similarly, in just 4 years, Palm had gone from zero to $165 million in sales, with an advertising budget that was a tiny fraction of what you'd expect to launch a new product in the packaged goods industry. So just like that, Tim, seemingly overnight, they create an industry out of nothing and a successful product out of nothing based on this just aggression and taking advantage of every opportunity. Just like that, there's another company in the portfolio of the wonderful company.
What's next, Ty? There's got to be more. They just keep going and going.
Okay, so this one may shock some people. Okay, so the next acquisition, again, a focus on acquisition, is of Fiji water. Heard of it? So I had no idea that the wonderful company owned Fiji water. So they bought Fiji for $150 million. And again, I'm going to be brief here, Tim, but same story. Lynda comes in and she just looks at, hey, what is the current situation? How do we differentiate? And if you remember, this was, a long time ago. I remember Fiji when it first came out. This is like cool, expensive water. It had a waterfall on the front. Okay, so our listeners, you guys might remember this. Lynda, as she understood, like, where's this water coming from? What's the unique advantage of Fiji water? Comes to learn about how does Fiji acquire this water, right? A lot of people didn't even believe that Fiji water is from Fiji. Fiji comes from a remote island in Fiji, in fact, thousands of miles from the nearest industrialized society. They actually tried to have a little fun with this, Tim, and educates consumers with a simple slogan. The label says Fiji because it's not bottled in Cleveland. That apparently offended some people in Cleveland, but that's also just an aside. Lynda and the wonderful company are not shy about being edgy and controversial in their marketing campaigns. There's a ton of examples, controversial Super Bowl ads, edgy marketing campaigns, and another key aspect of Lynda's approach. But their water is actually a renewable resource supplied by monsoon rains. It comes from an aquifer on the edge of a Fijian rainforest deep beneath the Earth's surface. As the EPA has pointed out, water from artesian aquifers is protected from contamination by confining layers of rock. Rainwater seeps through the rock over hundreds of years, but the rock acts as a barrier to pollutants. Consequently, water from artesian aquifers is purer than spring water. On this Fijian island, water from the aquifer is a whole different level of pure. So water falls through on this island, the monsoons, filter through this volcanic rock over a long period of time, end up in this aquifer. And then they pull the water out of this aquifer. Crazy. Like, I didn't know this. This is wild. And it's like some of the purest water you can get. So she's like, why aren't we leaning into this? Why do people know we're not taking water like this? So she changed the bottle to a flower that is like a native flower of Fiji, and leans into telling this story. And they also lean into being luxury, right? So they spend a ton of marketing dollars putting Fiji in movies, right? Like product placement in movies, at high class events and fundraisers. They just provide water so that people are seen holding the Fiji water bottle. So she just leans into this being a high end brand and a luxury good.
Totally. And the shape of the bottle, again, is differentiated. It's a square bottle, which is totally uncommon for any other bottled water that you buy at the time. Like, you buy the square bottle, like you're drinking some fancy water. If you go to a nice hotel, they usually have Fiji in the room for you.
You know, her book is borderline just like an ad, a sales ad for the wonderful company. So a grain of salt with everything. But she talks about just the growth of Fiji. Since they purchased the company in November 2004, the sales of Fiji water have increased by more than 300%, while the industry has grown by about 30% in the same period. In 2008, they surpassed Evian to become the leading premium bottled water in the US. So just another home run, Tim. Another home run.
Just one after another. They can't miss. So, Ty, we're going to jump ahead here to 2006. The citrus business is taking off, and Paramount is part of the Sunkist Cooperative. So they're basically outsourcing the sales and marketing to a third party. And like knowing the Resnicks, they know they can do it better. So in 2006, they leave the Sunkist Cooperative to capitalize on growth opportunities. It was important for Paramount to make a clean break from Sunkist and carve out its own distinct niche. So this is when we really get into the Mandarin category. Another category that was kind of uncommon at the time, like historically citrus was navel oranges. They're kind of hard to peel. They're not super friendly. You can't really give them to your kids and allow them to eat it super easily. And mandarins were kind of like a nascent category crop in California. Lynda becomes aware of this and sees this small little orange. It's easy to peel and thinks it's very cute. And so she thinks there could be a marketing opportunity here to market small mandarins that are easy to peel. It's a smaller serving size that you don't have to eat an entire orange, and they go all in on developing mandarins. So they initially do this as part of a joint venture. They work with the Evans family that also has large citrus acreage in the Central Valley that also have packing houses, and they co-create Cuties mandarins. So when you go to the store, Ty, you see the easy peelers. Like, I feel like everybody just calls them Cuties. They're technically a mandarin, but like people just know them as Cuties. They basically created an entire category, and this just takes off during this time. So Ty, I'm going to take it to a personal anecdote. Early in my career, was doing produce export, was heavily involved in citrus. Kind of around 2010 is where I got started in it, and Paramount Citrus was one of my vendors. So I'd go up to the Central Valley and visit this Delano facility, Ty, and it is impressive. I've been to hundreds of packing houses in my day, and this is by far the most impressive. It looks like you're going to a Silicon Valley tech campus. It's a monstrosity. It's a massive operation. And you see a lot of stuff that you don't see at normal packing houses. They have an on-site medical clinic. The first time I drove there, I had the wrong address pumped in. They have multiple addresses for one facility. I showed up to the medical clinic, realized that I was a couple streets over, and ended up at the main sales office. But super impressive. They have a dedicated person that all they do is provide tours. So you basically meet for your tour time, and they have so many people, buyers coming through the facility, import buyers, domestic retailers that want to see what's happening in the plant. All this girl does is walk around and basically tour you through the start to finish of how the mandarins are packed. When I was there, this was 2010, they were processing during the season 100 truckloads of mandarins a day. So think of a semi-truck going down the road, think about 100 of those getting processed on monster machinery that's all automated. They were by far the most technologically advanced packing house I've ever seen. So their focus on investment in the business was just apparent of like how different they operated from other packing houses that were just working with old school equipment that didn't have a focus on branding, but they were always kind of pushing the envelope forward. So in 2013, they started to have some issues with their business partner on Cuties, the Evans family. They were having disagreements on how the program was being managed, how the brand was being invested in. And so they decided to part ways in 2013. So they split ways. The Evans were going to take all their fruit, pack it in their facilities. The Resnicks were going to take all their fruit and pack it in their facilities. And as part of the deal, Evans retained ownership of the Cuties brand. So Resnick is in 2013, has a lot of mandarins, doesn't have his own brand. And this is where they really go all in on the wonderful name and launch wonderful halos. So you see halos in stores. If you go to the grocery store, you usually see Cuties or halos. There's a few other brands, but they basically like rebranded to halos in 2013.
Yeah, you can see just a focus on doing things the right way. No cutting corners. I mean, I guess they cut corners in certain ways with water, but just, they're not cutting corners in production. They're not cutting corners in marketing. They're leaning into these things of how do we do best in class. And I think they have that luxury because they have scale. I think that's something that we can't miss, Tim, is because they have just this machine of the holding company behind them. They can take these bets with pretty reasonable certainty that they can create a successful product. They have the marketing dollars, they have the marketing prowess, they have the scale, they have the growers, they have the channels, the processing to do this. So I think, a lot of people are like, oh, we need to go direct to consumer, but you don't have the scale to really do that without massive investment and, competing against the 800-pound gorillas in the room. They were that. So I think that's important to call out.
Totally. And I've worked with people that worked for Paramount Citrus, now the wonderful company, previous and past employees, and people that have worked there have nothing but good things to say about the Resnicks and how they invest in their employees and help manage the business. They have a lot of reinvestment into their workforce and a really strong company culture. So Ty, Stewart and Lynda have a lot of different businesses going on. They've got the pomegranate business, the citrus business, the almond business, the pistachio business. It's getting a little out of control. So in 2015, they just want to get a rein on this and kind of make it a little bit more easy for consumers, retailers to understand, and they rebrand as the Wonderful Company. So as part of this, they basically create vertical platforms. They have Wonderful Pistachios, Wonderful Almonds, Wonderful Citrus, and Palm Wonderful to kind of build out their agribusiness portfolio.
And the thing that precipitated this was a pistachio recall, Tim. So they were in the pistachio game, one of the largest growers, as you mentioned, but there was a recall that happened, and it was, a national recall. It's coming off the shelves everywhere, and there wasn't really branding established with this commodity, right? There wasn't particular brands, and so everyone stopped buying pistachios. And even though the affected crop wasn't part of the Wonderful portfolio, their business was massively impacted as a result. And so this was the key turning point for them of we need our own brand here as well. And I think this really led to this strategy of, hey, we had built Palm, we had built some, the halos, but we need to do this for across our portfolio. And so they built out Wonderful Pistachios, ton of investment into this, Tim. There was a massive Get Crackin' campaign that went viral, and they had commercials and social media and all around this Get Crackin'. And so now you go into Whole Foods, what's on the wall? Wonderful Pistachios. They built a brand about it so that they can control their destiny. If there was a recall for another crop, another brand, they could be insulated from that.
Totally. They go all in on marketing. Ty, fun anecdote. So they have this facility in Delano. It's right on Highway 99. Kind of when they had this split with Evans, when you drive by the Evans facility off 99, they put up a big Cuties billboard. And I guess Stewart was apparently very upset with this, and he wanted to put a bigger billboard in front of their facility and got denied. There were some permitting issues, but they had this building that I think was used for storage of packaging materials or something. And so since he couldn't get the billboard, he built on the side of this building a wrap that shows a wonderful halo. So it's massive. You could see it from the Evans ranches, which was one of the reasons why he built it so big. So if you look in any direction in the Delano area, you can spot this massive building that's wrapped in a wonderful halo.
It's time we took a second to acknowledge this character of Stewart Resnick. He hasn't done a ton of interviews. He's 5 foot 5 inches, not of tall stature, and he is insane. He's incredibly aggressive. He's known to be incredibly vulgar, incredibly aggressive, incredibly hostile. And this 1-2 punch of Stewart and Lynda is no wonder. It's the perfect combination. You have this ruthless businessman that is just being as aggressive as you can on just operations, increasing pricing, lowering costs, and being as aggressive as you can be on business. And then you have Lynda, the marketing genius, that is taking these key levers, making these key decisions on the marketing front from a marketing perspective and a brand strategy perspective, but also on an advertising, right? Leveraging advertising incredibly well. And no wonder you end up here. But we heard a story just about him talking about the Pistachio Growers Association. In many cases, he doesn't want to be associated with the Growers Association because he's driving the market himself. And so there's stories of him saying F-bomb the Growers Association, right? He hates them. He's very vocal about this fact.
Yeah, he could do it better himself. Same thing would happen with Sunkist and all these other categories of why rely on a third party to build your market when he's much better and faster at building demand and creating opportunity.
All right, to give you an idea of scale here, today Wonderful is a $5 billion company. In 2020, it was announced that Wonderful Pistachios had exceeded $1 billion in sales. So at that time, it was probably about a quarter of their revenue coming from pistachios, Tim. We don't have a breakdown of the revenue by business, by category, because they're a private company. They don't need to report on these things, but that gives you a sense of just how big the pistachio deal became.
Totally. And there's so many other businesses that aren't consumer-facing brand that Wonderful has an interest in. They have a nursery business where they develop their own varieties and rootstock, and they sell their rootstock to their own orchards to develop new plantings, as well as sell them to growers that they don't process for. They also have a business called Suterra, which does crop protection and pest control. So like beyond just moving into processing and consumer packaged goods, they're also moving downstream to crop protection, nursery. They're basically like end to end, have ownership in all these different businesses, which is super interesting.
All right. So, Tim, it's about time we bring this to a close and then get into a little bit of our takeaways and analysis. But they also get into wine a little later. So in 2010, 2011 timeframe, they acquired Justin Vineyards in Paso Robles. And then they also buy Lewis Cellars, a winery, in 2021. So they get into the wine business, Tim. It's pretty small, like it's relatively to their whole portfolio. But they decide to diversify again and get into wine on the Central Coast. And there could be some sort of water play here, Tim, of like mitigating risk and being in a different location that grows wines. But it's not a huge piece of the pie. But they also get into the wine industry as well.
Yeah, it's just announcement after announcement. If you look at the timeline of this company, it's like every year there's some new milestone. Like even on the citrus front, a couple of years back in 2019, they launched Wonderful Seedless Lemons. So think about when you get a lemon, you want to squeeze it for some juice. It's always annoying when you get a couple seeds in there. You got to pick them out. It's always kind of messy.
You got to get a strainer, Tim. You got to get a strainer.
Or just get a seedless lemon, Ty. So they have the nursery business. They can work on genetics. They can play around with things, and they basically are creating a new market for seedless lemons. So I've seen those in stores. That's beginning to grow, but just crazy how they're continuing to push the industry forward and come up with new products that really create their own market. And Ty, probably the most recent news was December of 2023, last year, when the Resnicks settled a lawsuit with the Assimi family. The Assimi family is a large pistachio grower in the Central Valley as well. They were sending their pistachios to Resnick, and they had a dispute on a crop where they said they didn't get paid, and became kind of a battle between the Assimi family and the Resnicks. The Assimis wanted to build their own packing house, and Stewart knew that they were kind of angling to take their supply that they were sending to Resnick and create their own brand. He saw this as a competitive threat. And so it was engulfed in lawsuits for a couple of years. Ultimately, it settled in the Assimi's favor. There were judgments on both sides, but the Assimis ended up winning that one. So for all the wins, one loss for Stewart here, but just interesting to see how aggressive he is to make sure that he doesn't have competitive pressure in the pistachio space.
All right, Tim, man, that was a lot. Like you mentioned, it's every year something's happening. That was tough for us to get our arms around, but what a story. And Wonderful Company is still rolling, still growing. And it's going to be fascinating to see, Stewart and Lynda are 80s, right? And it's going to be wild to see just who takes over the Wonderful Company and where it goes from here. Like you mentioned, they have incredible company culture. They are invested in their employees. They've made a ton of investments in Lost Hills area. Meanwhile, they're living in Beverly Hills. They give each employee, I think it was like $500 to invest in the charity of their choice. So they've really leaned into the local community there, investing in their employees, good company culture. Like you mentioned, Tim, like when is our medical center going to be available at Nest Farms? But so much to be said for this empire that they've built. They've kept it private their whole time, kept control the whole time, and they've stayed together through it all. This power couple that stayed together and built this business. I don't know if we have a really comparable story about a husband-wife team building something this big and holding it for the long term.
Such an impressive story, like from where both of them started to what they built the Wonderful Company into today. Like take away just on like the agricultural side of things, like they seem to have capitalized on the front end of a boom for all these different crops. Like citrus, they were able to capitalize on the substantial growth of mandarins, which is really driving the citrus category. Almonds, pistachios were kind of nascent when they started taking over, and they've been able to create huge opportunities and demand in those categories. Substantial export markets on both those crops to countries that it's a luxury item because we can only produce those crops in a certain amount of areas, and then the example with pomegranates, where it really wasn't a category. They built it from the ground up, and now it's associated with heart health, and they've built the pomegranate category.
I think another lesson for me, Tim, is just being opportunistic. They have this holdco, but they have sold assets, right? Like they sold the Franklin Mint, they've sold others over time, and so I think they are opportunistic about, hey, like this is a business that makes sense to sell at this time, and we're going to focus in these different areas. And ultimately, they really find every area of opportunity to grow the business. And I think like a lot of it is pretty like simple stuff of, hey, we're going to go after and grow this. And they've just been successful by having a really optimized organization. Like you said, like their operations are best in class. And I think they've just brought that skill set of, hey, we're going to do things the right way. And even if it costs a little bit more money, we're going to do it. And we're going to make sure we have a marketing strategy. We're not just selling a commodity. We don't do that. We do something different, and we create a unique product to sell to consumers.
Ty, I want to end this with an awesome quote that was part of his conversation with Mark Arax. He says, he was the bad guy in agriculture for no bigger offense than he was big. Stewart said, look, these farmers go back 2, 3, and sometimes 4 generations. Me, I'm a carpetbagger from Beverly Hills. I've never driven a tractor. I've never turned on an irrigation pump. But you ask the growers we process, and they'll tell you year in and year out, no one offers them a better price. No one pushes their product harder.
Great place to wrap it up. We made it, Tim, an hour and a half into recording. We'll see where the edited version ends up, but this was so inspiring. And they have their challenges, they have their warts, they've made their mistakes, but just so cool to see this business that they've built, and really a legacy that they've built with the wonderful company that every consumer in America touches, right? Like this is wild. So appreciate you guys who have stuck around to the end. This was a ton of fun for us to do. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'd love to get your feedback. Did you like this episode? Our first was with the Climate Corporation. It was our most downloaded episode ever. Let's make this our most downloaded episode ever. Share it with a friend who's in ag or in business and wants to hear this story. We'd really appreciate you sharing it. Subscribe to the podcast and let us know what you think. If you have any feedback on it, or hey, you guys didn't focus enough on this, or you missed this, we'll do a recap episode with stuff we missed with this episode. We could only do so much. So we'd love to hear from you guys, your feedback on the episode. But appreciate you tuning in to the latest story of the wonderful company on the Modern Acre podcast.